Earlier this week, we had you on talking about some of these commodities, but sort of put this into context now that we have this FAO report out about just how high prices have gotten over the past month.
Yeah, I mean, the index today is for the month of March, and it was a 13% gain. That's a record. I've been following this index for a while, and it's usually solidly in the single digits. So, yeah, that's pretty dramatic. And, you know, the index tracks essentially grains, vegetable oil, sugar, meat, ingredients that are in the bulk of everything you see in the grocery store. So it just kind of shows the breadth that this war is having on global supplies. As you guys showed earlier, you know, Ukraine and Russia too are both massive exporters of grains and vegetable oils, and the FAO really pared back its estimates for Ukraine exports in particular today.
Now, Samuel, you're seeing how this is impacting Africa as well. And it's not just the war that's impacting food prices. There's drought. There are other factors here at play. How does the situation look, and how much worse can it get?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the situation, even just before the conflict in Ukraine broke out, was already very dire. Like in the Horn of Africa, there's conflict going on in Ethiopia. There's a drought, the driest in the past 40 years. And this is a region that is more or less kind of accustomed to dry weather, but this is, you know, it's taking it to the next level. So as you said, by some estimates, 13 million people in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa, need humanitarian assistance for food. But it's not just in the Horn of Africa, in West Africa. The World Food Programme came out today saying the number of people that need humanitarian assistance or are in danger of hunger has quadrupled in the past 4 years. Similarly, this is not just because of the effects of the war in Ukraine, but of previous other, you know, weather-related and conflict-related issues that have really created a situation where, you know, this Ukraine situation has just pushed everything to the extremes.
Samuel, is there any sort of support that is coming in for people who are experiencing some of the shortages that we're seeing as a result from high food prices?
I mean, the UN agencies are really, you know, sounding the alarms that there is really a lot of need in financial aid that needs to come to these areas, both in the West and in the East Africa, because these communities have gone through several seasons without rain, with agriculture produce not giving them the kind of yields that they needed. So their coping mechanisms are more or less running out. So unless there is some kind of support that comes from the governments and the international aid agencies, the situation is really looking dire.
Megan, if you look at the surge in food prices that we're seeing around the world, is there any moment in time you can compare it to? Because in the past, we have seen major unrest being caused by spiking inflation when it comes to food and food insecurity. So is there anything that this reminds you of?
Yeah, so the previous two spikes in the food price index that you kind of alluded to were in 2008 and around 2011. Like you said, 2011, a lot of people associate with the Arab Spring, those times. So yeah, I mean, I guess the surprising thing right now is just the pace we're going at. Like 13% in a month is a very dramatic increase. But as of where the index stands now, it's taken out the peaks that we saw in both of those two previous spikes.
Megan, how is this affecting sort of global trade as a whole, and what countries are importing and exporting across the world?
Yeah, so we're seeing countries like India become a bigger wheat exporter. The agency today that said Europe and Argentina, the Americas, could also see some bigger sales as well. But the problem is that it's not fully offsetting the losses from Ukraine. And they also said that, you know, Russian exports are being hampered by freight and financing issues. It's just difficult to do business in Russia right now, given the war. So all in all, there are countries that are stepping in, helping to fill the gaps, but the question is just whether it will be enough.
You know, Sam, I'm wondering if you could kind of draw out the urgency here, because the idea of whether these moves will be enough, even if eventually they do become enough, they won't come fast enough. And that means a lot of people will suffer. They will face poverty, and many will die because they're not able to find the food that they need. So, you know, what do you think is going to play out in the next couple of months, and how may people live through this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to look at this is as well, like the kind of the proportion of your household income that goes into providing food for the families. So when you're looking at it in Africa, it's in most of the countries, it is half of their income usually goes to buying food. Unlike, say, in Europe and in America, it's a smaller portion. So when the cost of food rises at the level that it is going up now, as well as the cost of inputs for agriculture, the likes of fertilizer is really, like in some parts tripled, then it's on both sides of the equation, the situation is getting really dire. And I mean, there are visuals of cattle kind of like littered in the Horn of Africa, where for the pastoralist families that are more or less, like hanging on by a string. Similarly, like there's also more warnings in West Africa. Unless some intervention is provided in the next 3 months, we might see another like 12, 15 million people getting into a more dire situation. That was by Oxfam earlier this week. So it is really a situation that some attention needs to be paid to pretty quickly. Otherwise, the lives and the livelihoods of millions of people on the continent, at least in Africa, are on the line.
And Megan, just finally, when it comes to intervention, as Samuel was mentioning, where are we at? When could we potentially see relief? When could we potentially see prices go down? Is there an expectation that in April it's going to go up even more? Because a lot of estimates are that this war is going to continue on for months, maybe even longer. So what's the expectation?
Yeah, like you said, so a lot's going to just depend on the duration of the war. If it, right now Ukraine is shipping out some exports. It's ramping up its exports by rail, but it really doesn't compare to how much it can sell usually through its ports. I mean, at a port you can load, a 30,000 ton, 60,000 ton grain ship. You just can't do that with a railway. So they still have all of this grain that's backing up. It's in surplus. It's still there. But the question is, how quickly can that reach world markets? And now farmers in Ukraine are going to be planting next year's crops as well, and a lot of questions about how that's going to go. So, it's a bit difficult to say. It really kind of hinges on the trajectory of the war and also the weather and how harvests fare everywhere else.
So, Megan, just finally, I mean, what's the next thing that you're paying attention to then?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's all about plantings around the world, weather around the world. Like I said, we're focusing a lot on Ukraine, but in the U.S., in France, in Canada, they're also going to be planting their grain crops too. If they have a really big harvest this year, that will help ease some of the pressure. If there's weather challenges there, it just adds to the situation. Right now, we're seeing dryness in a lot of the U.S. wheat areas, for example. So they're going to need some rain soon to help have a better wheat crop as well.